So just before we get started, we'd love to run a quick poll. We already have more than 100 people who have joined us. So we want to understand who's in our audience today. So Soma, can you please launch a poll? You'll see a box pop up, and if you could just select your organizational affiliation and click submit. Okay, let's end the poll. And you should see the results of the poll in front of you. So we have the majority from NGOs, followed by private sector development, agency or donor, academia, and other individuals. So thank you for taking part in this poll. So as a quick introduction, Kopernik is a Bali-based organization. We're a research and development lab for social and environmental challenges. We've been working across Indonesia for the past 10 years, including quite a few emergency responses. We've also been active in the COVID-19 response, covering the areas of prevention, through a public education campaign, response. Here you can see a summary of some of the support we've been providing to medical facilities as well as communities over the last couple of months. And we also facilitate a non-government coordination group here in Bali, thanks to the support of DFAT and Siap Siaga. And as part of our COVID-19 response, we've been conducting research about the impact of COVID-19 on people's livelihoods, and this is what today's webinar is all about. So we'll have a presentation, we'll have an introduction by Toshi, followed by presentations from the research team, which will then be followed by a Q&A session. So now I'm going to hand over to Toshi, who is the CEO and the other co-founder of Kopernik. Over to you, Toshi.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. So as Eva explained, Kopernik has been active in responding to the COVID crisis, mostly focusing around the health and hygiene area, as this was really has been the primary concern for the communities. But as the COVID situation continues, the impact on the livelihood and job and income has become more severe, and we wanted to understand the extent to which the COVID-19 is having on the Balinese people, and also wanted to understand the possibly a different impact of COVID-19 on the different segments of Balinese society. So that was the reason why we started this assessment. And this assessment was funded by a David and Lucille Packard Foundation. And today, the team will introduce some of the findings from our research. And so back to you, Eva.
Thank you very much, Toshi. I apologize for any technical difficulties. I got some feedback that I was breaking up a little bit, so I'm sorry about that. So we've got 115 people who have joined us. Welcome to those who have just joined. We had 193 people sign up, which is great. Okay, so thanks Toshi for the intro. I'd like to now introduce the research team who will present the findings. We have Stefan, who's an associate manager. We've got Chandra, who's an analyst, and we've got Tunga, who's also an associate manager at Kopernik. So we'll start off with you, Stefan.
Yes, thank you, Eva. So, well, thank you everyone for joining this webinar. And as Toshi mentioned before, that Kopernik has done a rapid assessment on the impact of COVID-19 on the livelihood in Bali. So I guess before we look at the results, so let's go through on the rapid assessment methodology and then key questions that we use to conduct this research. Well, as you can see, so from the sampling method that we use on this research, so we use what is called Snowball sampling method. And the reason why we use this method is that one is because the method has a relatively quick and the less resources needed in terms of...
Stefan, sorry, I'm just going to stop you for 1 second. Can everyone hear us? Because I'm getting some feedback that, yes, thumbs up, okay. So for those that are not able to hear, if you could click the join audio button. Thank you. Sorry, back to you, Stefan.
Yes, no worries, yes. So yes, as we just discussed, the sampling method that we use is the Snowball sampling method. And then the reason why was this, it is relatively quick and then less resources in terms of the preparation needed. So here we start by identifying a set of characteristics and parameters of the respondents. So as soon as we set the parameters and then the characteristic, we start calling them, and then we ask their friends or their relatives who were working in the same sectors or who has similar parameters that we already set. So by doing so, we were able to cover different sectors in Bali, as well as a respondent coming from different region, which is good to have those who are located in rural areas. So in terms of the survey sampling, so in total we have we have around 87 interviewees, and then out of 87, the 77 of the respondent is considered as a household respondents. And then whereas we interviewed 10 business owners to understand the business here. Additionally, we beside the phone interview to the household and the business owners, we also conducted the interview to Deputy Director of Gugus Tugas in Bali. And also we did the literature review and then our desktop research on the studies related to COVID-19. And here the data was collected in mid-May. It was from 6 to 14 May, roughly 2 weeks. And we understand that there are limitations coming from this sampling method that we use, is that because the Snowball sampling method itself is a non-probability sampling method, which it is may increase the bias in terms of variability. And the second one is that you can see the sampling size might not be too much, or it might not be the representative of the population in Bali. Where the last one is that we know that this COVID-19 is a time-specific issue, where the data collected applies only to a specific time period. And the changes in terms of the social economics appearing as we progress. So we look at this as time specific in data collection. Yes, so next one, in terms of the key questions, we have 4 key questions to do a rapid assessment here. The first one, it's around the livelihood condition before COVID-19. So here we want to understand what was the condition of the people of the Balinese economy before COVID-19 period. And then the second one, we kind of want to know, or we ask the people, what was the impact of this COVID-19 on their livelihood. So apart from that, we also asked the people, or we also did research on what is going on around the livelihood assistance initiative around COVID-19. And the last one is that we want to try to understand the response or the gaps, and then the additional livelihood support that might require for us if we want to help those in need. Yes, that was the methodology and the key questions. And now we move on to the results. The first one, I want to discuss a little bit on the livelihood condition before COVID-19. So, well, as we already know that the Bali economy is really highly depending on the tourism sector. And if we take a closer look on these tourism sectors, by the government definition, there are coming from the different subsectors, which is, if you can see here, it's accommodation and food service. It's from transportation and warehousing, construction, wholesale, and retail. So these are the sectors that contribute to the tourism sectors in Bali. And if we look at the number of people employed in this sector, we can see that almost 50% of the people in Bali is employed in the tourism sector. So huge impact on tourism will have a quite big impact to Balinese economy. And here, this is interesting. If you see in the map here, so when we break down to each region and then look at what is the dominant sector here in each region, the dominant sector refers, I guess, to the contribution of these sectors to the region income. Well, here you can see in Bali, it is divided into two parts. So the first bottom part, or the southern part of Bali, is like highly depending on the accommodation and food services. For example, such as in Badung and the Pasar and other region. Whereas on the top part of Bali, or the head part, you can see the north part. So these regions are focusing on the agriculture, forestry, and fishery. So this is quite interesting to map Bali Island as these dominant sectors. So also we look at the proportions or percentage of poor people in Bali. Here it is, we will look at the data coming from the government. Says that Karangasem has the highest proportions of poor people in Bali. Well, it is followed up by Klungkung, Bangli, and other regions. Well, to this both information, it's quite useful if for our further research and assistance to know where are the people are most impacted. And the next one, I guess, we will discuss on the impact of COVID-19 in Bali. But first of all, I would start with the macro level of impact. So we know that Bali has a positive growth rate since 2019. since 2017, sorry, and as the government stated in 2020 Q1, there is a sharp decline in terms of the economic growth rate. In Q1 2020, it was counted as a minus 1.1% of growth rate. This is in terms of macro level. And if we break down this macro level data, we can see that there are two graph here. The top one is a yearly based changes, and then the bottom one is the quarterly. And here we can also see that the tourism sector has a huge impact, or has a negative growth rate in terms of macroeconomic. And next, our colleague Chandra will discuss more on the impact in the micro level, or at the household level. So I will hand over to you, Chandra.
Yes, thank you, Stefan. So in order to understand the impact of COVID-19 on people's livelihood in Bali, we interviewed 77 households as part of this rapid assessment. So these are the demographics. In terms of respondents' gender, 68% are male, while the other 32% are female. And if you take a look at the respondents' origin, 82% are Balinese people, while the other 18% are non-Balinese Indonesian people who are living in Bali right now. And also, our respondents are 49% coming from the age group of 25 until 34 years old, followed by 35 until 44, and 16 until 24 years old. So COVID-19 has impacted the livelihood in Bali. We can see that 81% of the respondents in Bali have experienced a reduction in income as a result of COVID-19. So of whom 44% have been either permanently or temporarily laid off, while the other 56% are working less hours with or having a reduction in income. So we tried to take a closer look on our data, and we tried to categorize each of the respondents. So here we can see that female respondents have been more impacted by COVID-19 with 72% of income reduction, followed by male with 56% of income reduction, and in overall, they convey income reduction of 61%. And also, we see in terms of support received by the respondents. So while support provided to both male and female respondents have been relatively even, we can see that in overall, the respondents, mostly of the respondents, more than 50% of the respondents have not received any kind of support related to COVID-19 situation. So here we are curious about how COVID-19 has impacted the livelihood in Bali in terms of origin. So Balinese are respondents who are born and live in Bali, while non-Balinese are Indonesian people who are currently live in Bali, while came from the other region outside Bali. So we can see that the non-Balinese Indonesian respondents are experiencing a more severe reduction in income, with 64% of income reduction compared to Balinese respondents with 61% of income reduction. So here, in terms of support received by Balinese and non-Balinese, we can see there's a huge gap in terms of support that they receive. Only 21% of the non-Balinese respondents have received support related to the COVID, while there are more than 50% of Balinese respondents mentioned that they already received support related to the COVID-19 situation. In terms of the formal and informal type of data, we can see that the respondents in the informal sectors, such as people who are working as a gardener, for example, or security workers, or maybe a driver, they have been severely impacted with a 71% of income reduction compared to 56% of income reduction for those in the formal sector. So people who are working as a financial officer, for example, or maybe government officials. So while both of them receive slightly even supports, the informal sector have been received more supports rather than the formal sectors. So we also try to break down the data into each type of the regions in Bali. So we can see that the Kelungkung has the highest drop rate of income, followed by Badung with 78%, Buleleng, and Karangasem. And in terms of support received by location, we also can see that Kelungkung has the highest percentage of income received, with 78% of the respondents have received supports, followed by Badung and Jemberana. However, our respondents in Tabanan mentioned that they did not receive any kind of support related to the COVID-19. So here we try to break down each of the expenses into categories such as food, transportation, rent, utilities such as electricity, phone and internet, and other expenses. So we can see that the average of expenses before COVID is at 3.2 million, while they adjusted their expenses during COVID into 2.1 million. So in overall, they actually are adapting to the impact of COVID-19 by significantly decreasing their expenses in all categories except utilities. This was due to the restriction of outside activities, and people tend to spend more money on electricity and internet. So here we look at the comparison between income and expenses before COVID and during COVID. So before COVID-19, people in Bali have several spare of money with roughly 1.6 million left over after expenses, while during COVID-19, although the expenses have been adjusted to 2.1 million, we can see that the expenses are higher than the income. This was due to the high drop of income of respondents in Bali. So in terms of coping mechanism, we can see that 60% of people in Bali are doing nothing, while they mentioned they still waiting for the support from various sources, while the other 40% are coping with the current situation. So those who are cope with the current situation, 58% of them are finding another alternative source of income, followed by going back to agriculture, reducing their monthly expenses, and take out loans. And for people who are finding an alternative of income, mainly they are selling products such as food, hygiene-related product, as in soap and disinfectant, followed by people who are doing freelancing, finding new job, and join in a competition. So we tried to take a closer look also about how COVID-19 has impacted the businesses in Bali in terms of revenue. So we interviewed 10 business owners, and 9 out of 10 business owners stated that they have reduced in revenue. And out of 9 of 10 business owners mentioned that 78% of them didn't have any revenue at all during current situation, in the COVID-19 situation, while the rest only maintain to have revenue up to 40 until 50% respectively. So if we take a look at the business status, 33% of the 9 business owners stated that they either temporarily or close their business, while the other business owners mentioned that they only can sustain up until 6 months in average if the current situation goes on in several months. So that's it from the impact of COVID-19. So the next section will be gaps and required support that will be presented by our colleagues, Tungga. Over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Chandra. So as you have seen how COVID-19 has impacted the livelihood of people in Bali. However, there are also ongoing supports that are currently provided by various players. So we conducted a key informant interview with Gugus Tugas Bali, as well as collating all the data of the NGO support here in Bali, and conducted desktop research. And we found out that the government support has mainly focused on providing financial or cash transfer, as well as the utility supports through subsidies for the electricity to the poor people. Meanwhile, for the NGO support, has mainly focused on giving the family and community supplies, such as food aid, followed by awareness raising and campaigns around protection from COVID, and also distribution of health-related supplies to medical workers. So then we are curious to know how many of our respondents has received any supports during COVID-19. So out of 77 respondents, we found that 46% of them has received any supports during COVID. Meanwhile, 54% of them has not received any support yet during COVID-19. So for those respondents who received support, the majority, or 58%, stated that they received food, followed by masks and also hand sanitizer. So from those respondents who received the supports, we would like to know how their perception or their response toward the support that has been given. And we found that the majority of our respondents stated that the supports that has been given were either very useful or useful. And the main reason they stated this answer was because the support has helped them to recover, especially when they lose their job, or when they don't have money to buy supplies, and also when it's difficult to find health-related products at stores. Meanwhile, there are 3 people who stated that the support has been given were not useful at all. And the main reason of this answer was due to the mistargeting, which means that they're already in a good financial situation, but they still receive support during COVID-19. So after mapping out all the supports, we also want to know the providers of the support. So we asked our respondent who has given the support to them. And the majority of them stated that the local administrative or the village council, or known as Banjar here in Bali, has been the main channel for distributing the support to the community. So, which means that a lot of ongoing supports right now here in Bali are in a close coordination with Banjar. Next, so we have mapped the supports that currently provided, but also we would like to know whether any gaps in terms of support that has been provided. So we asked the respondents about their fulfillment of their needs in terms of short terms and long term. And interestingly, we found for right now, or in the short term, the majority of the respondents stated that their needs have been fulfilled or somewhat fulfilled. However, for the long term, 62% of them stated that they were feeling uncertain of the fulfillment of their long-term needs if COVID-19 is still happening. So then we are curious to know what are their needs to better support them in short term and also long term. So we asked them to express what kind of needs that are important for them right now. So we found for short term, food was the main needs for majority of the respondents in the short term. However, when we ask their needs in the long terms, it's also very interesting to find that there are additional needs are expressed, which mainly the new job and also training has been identified as priorities for the long-term needs after food and cash. So after we explain more about the situation before COVID and also how COVID has impacted the livelihood of people in Bali and map out what are the existing support and also gaps, we finally come into the conclusion about the implication for the future livelihood support in Bali, which will be explained more by Toshi. So hand over to you, Toshi.
Okay, thank you very much, Tunga. So as we have seen that we have seen a lot of numbers and chart, but I mean, what we have found is that the impact is really real. And if kind of we go around the communities, we do see that different kind of activities are ongoing. And so we wanted to really also think about what these data means for the future support. In a webinar today, are really interested in doing something about this condition. So first of all, the COVID-19 impact on the livelihood is deep and widespread, as we have seen. And it is important to provide continued support. And we did see that the impact seems to be uneven on different segments of the society, such as women, informal workers, and then also the non-Balinese Indonesian residents. So this is quite important to understand because we can then direct the appropriate support to those who are more disadvantaged. And also, as Tunga explained, and food and financial assistance will be needed in the longer term, but additional needs are being expressed by the respondents, such as skill training and job creation. Next, and we have seen that from the initial slides from Stefan, Balinese economy is heavily dependent on tourism, but unfortunately, the tourism sector is unlikely to come back and bounce back in the short term. So the second largest sector, which is agriculture, and if we can be creative in assistance in the agricultural sector, this can provide an opportunity. And especially for the food security, that we have seen that the people are spending still the majority of the reduced income on food. So if we can do something around agriculture, we could potentially address the food security needs, and then in the longer term, increase their income by helping them to reach domestic and international market. So this requires the reskilling, and then also improving the agricultural value chain, and then helping the product to access market. And so if we can do this successfully, the livelihood of Balinese people are likely to be more resilient. And finally, this situation is evolving every day. And the period where we collected this data is from mid-May. It's already been a month. But I believe that because of the continued impact, the livelihood situation is changing. So it's really important to be checking the status on a regular basis, and then also so that we all can provide the right support, the support to be really addressing the most latest needs of the Balinese communities. And also, I think it would be also useful to conduct a similar type of assessment, if not done, in other areas to better understand the conditions too. So as a Kopernik, we are now brainstorming and planning a small assistance in response to this livelihood situation. And in the short term, we want to address the food security needs in the communities. In the longer term, we want to improve the livelihood conditions by helping them improve increase the value of the agricultural produce and help them connect to the market. So that is all from the team, and then I'll hand this back to Eva.
Thank you, Toshi, Tunga, Chandra, and Stefan for presenting the findings. So now it's time for the question and answer session. We've already been receiving quite a few questions through the text, the chat box function, so thank you. We'll get to those in just one moment. in front of you, you can see how you can raise your hand and ask a question directly, in which case we would ask you to turn on your video and ask the question directly, or you can type your question in the chat box. In both cases, please do tell us your name and where you're from before or after asking your question. So let's jump straight into the questions. The first question was from Adrian regarding the definition of poor people. Toshi, do you want to take that one?
Yes, thank you. So this the number that Stefan used is basically borrowed from the Balinese government statistics office. The Indonesian government defines poverty slightly differently from the international commonly used definition of $1.9 per day per capita. Indonesian government is using the 2,100 calories per day as a benchmark, and then calculate the amount of money that is required to get that amount of calorie, plus some additional non-food item. And so that's how the government of Indonesia set the poverty line. And then this is different depending on the province. And then those who are earning below that line are considered under the poverty line. And but if anybody in the group is in a better position to explain, I would like to welcome. But so that's the understanding of how poverty is defined in Bali.
Okay, thank you, Toshi.
Thank you. So we'll move to the next question from Petra from Pulse Lab Jakarta. Hi, Petra. So the question is, does your sample represent the various districts across Bali, considering that there are different characteristics of dominant livelihood types in different districts? Stefan, would you like to take that one?
Sure, yes. Thank you for the questions. So as we know that during the research, so we try and we want to have a respondent as general as possible, and where the characteristic of the respondents, whether it is the job sectors that they are working or the geographical location that they reside, is quite representative of people in Bali. And by those things, so we try to get quite even a number of respondents coming from each region in Bali. For example, here, I mean, we have in total we have a 77 household spread across 8 regency and 1 city, which is Denpasar. And the number of respondents, the highest one is coming from Denpasar and Gianyar, which is 15 respondents is coming from Denpasar, and the 14 coming from Gianyar. Whereas the other regions has almost equally even in terms of number of respondents, which is around 7, 6, and 9. So that is this is we have this intentionally in mind, so that we know that the data that we are collected is quite representative, not heavily, how do you say this, focusing on one region only, but spread around across the regions in Bali province. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan. I'm just going to jump to a question regarding the sample size. We've Hi, David. You mentioned that our sample size is really small, and do we think that it's representative of the 4.5 million population of Bali? So, Toshi, do you want to tackle that one?
I mean, it's an excellent point, and it's really a balance that we had to strike between having more representative samples versus working on a low budget and yet trying to understand the situation and then try to release the result quickly because the situation is evolving as we speak. So yes, I think ideally we would like to have a larger sample size to really better understand the condition. But given the limitations, this was the best kind of balance that we had to strike.
Thanks for clarifying that, Toshi. So now we'll jump to the next question from Pak Lukman. As economies begin reopening, will Kopernik conduct the study again to assess the jobs at risk and the impact on livelihoods in Bali in upcoming months? And in addition, there was a comment that fears over virus transmission have cast a shadow on the government's plan to reopen tourist destinations across Indonesia, especially as the number of COVID-19 cases continues to climb. What are the risks that people in Bali are raising with you? What are they most concerned about the new normal? When do you believe that the tourism is going to restart? And what will it all mean in terms of safety, health, and economy? Toshi, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, so in terms of the continued assessment, yes, we do want to continue. Again, I think like any businesses, individuals, Kopernik also have to balance the resources versus available resources versus activities that we can conduct. So we are keen, and if any other individuals, organizations, agencies would like to join force, please do let us know so that we can continue to monitor. On the second question, again, we are not in a position to speak on behalf of the government, obviously, but as Tunga shared, we have heard of the continued need for food and cash, and then different types of needs arising because of the situation, and which are related to the different types of job and the reskilling or training type of activities. I think we do need to continue to monitor and then really make sure that the assistance that we provide collectively are really addressing the needs of the population.
Okay, thanks, Toshi. So now we have a question from Bo Tiffany. Is there a reason why non-Balinese are receiving less support? Or it seems that it's harder to receive support if you're non-Balinese. Support distribution is usually identified by the KTP of the individual, and if the individual doesn't have a Bali KTP, it is unlikely that the Banjar. Sorry, am I answering the question? I might just hand over to Tunga.
Thanks, Eva. Thanks for the question, Stephanie. So yes, as we've interviewed our respondents, and most of them who's Indonesian but not Balinese native or not come originally from Bali, they said that they haven't received any support, because when we conduct an interview with local government, mostly the support providers has the list of the people in the Banjar or the village level, and that's identified by the identity card or KTP. And if you don't have Balinese KTP, for example, like me, then you will less likely to get the support. So this is also what we found during the research.
Thank you, Tunga. So, Pak Peta, you are asking whether we did a mapping for potential market or available markets which still exist, which could be used for Bali's economic revival. Chandra, do you want to take that one? Are you guys there?
Yes.
Toshi.
Sorry, which question is it? Sorry.
So this is about did you do mapping for potential market or available markets which still exist, which could be used for Bali's economic revival?
Yeah, so I think it's a really great idea. In this research, we really focused on the assessment of the impact on the household, plus to some lesser extent on the businesses. So we did not look into those, but I think these are really a great idea in terms of thinking about ways to connect supply and demand.
Great, thanks, Toshi. Now we have a question from Petra Sprang. What about the food surplus that's resulting due to the reduction of the missing tourists? Stefan?
Yes, it's really a good question, and it's always come up to my head also. And because we know that this tourism, the hotels, they demand lots of food, like vegetables, eggs, and everything from the farmers. And this COVID-19 has surely impacted in terms of the supply chain of this product, and this creates a new, well, I would not rather say new, but it creates interesting behavior to those farmers. So, well, I mean, if you are people who lives in Bali or resides in Bali, you might notice that a few weeks ago, and I guess you can also Google it on the news, that some of the farmers, they sell their harvest directly to the market, meaning that I was just passing by, and then I look at lots of cars that were selling eggs, for example, at the side of the street. And then when I was just curious asking them, so they were saying like, yes, we had to do this because the demand is now short, and then we have been raising this chicken for the past 3 months, and now we have this product, and when there is no demand, then we have to kind of go by ourselves to sell this food. And basically, these farmers and the producers, they put an effort to go and sell it directly to the consumers. And yes, there are still lots of surplus, and they have to maybe sell it in a very low price to compensate this surplus. That's
okay. Thanks, Stefan. So we have a question from Milena. Is there a method for assessing whether some people are in need of the support or not? The 3 people who said they didn't benefit from the support sticks out in my mind, that those resources could have gone to others in need. Stefan?
Yes, thank you. I guess, of course, I mean, like in all the cases, I mean, like in all these emergency response, in all the support that the government and the non-government people are trying to do, as this, you can say, the leakage of beneficiaries. And in my opinion, and while we discussed with the team, is that we know that during April and May, there was the peak of the COVID-19 concern. People are worried about what do they have as a food, what do they, how can they survive. So I guess as this government, they also like feel, I wouldn't say pressure, but they they need to do this assistance as soon as possible, and like by just distributing all this food to this location that they think that it is has a severe impact due to COVID-19. So they just do invoke something like that. And yes, of course, we see that there are some people who are not in need receive this one. And I guess this is a good balance, maybe at first in the emergency response that we try to reach everyone, we want to do it as soon as possible, as quick as possible. But then as the time goes by, we need to have some kind of systematic assistance or assessments for those people who really are in need. And maybe, yes, we discussed this also with the Gugus Tugas head of the deputy director of Gugus Tugas in Bali, and they were also doing or conducted this assessment in terms of identifying people who really are in need, and they realize that it takes time. So these things, while they do this assessment, they are providing assistance in parallel. So I guess the bias and then this leakage of beneficiaries always exists, but we want to minimize this as soon as possible by having to identify the beneficiaries.
Thanks, Stefan. I just saw a note from Bu Ruchina that in her Banjar, those people who did not need the government aid gave it back to the Banjar, and then it was redistributed to those who actually needed it. Stefan, I have another question for you regarding the sample. How were the 87 samples selected?
Yes, thank you. Well, as we discussed earlier, so we have a set of parameters that we are putting in our respondents because the purpose, because this snowballing method, as we apply to this research, is a type of purposive sampling method. So we want our respondent is coming from the major sectors in Bali, meaning that they work in major sectors such as tourism, agriculture, and others. And we also want them to coming from the different regions. So we don't want them, like the majority of them, like maybe all these respondents are coming from Denpasar, and then we don't want that to happen. So we try to have a proportionate number of respondents in each region and coming from a different sector. And initially, this snowballing method, we started initial list of people who are in need from those industry or geography, and then we start asking them to anyone working in the same industry in the same region that has similar condition as you are. So we start asking those contacts from our respondents. So we want also, by doing that, we were able to capture quite even spread of number of people coming from different industry and geography. Yes.
Thanks, Stefan. So we have a lot of questions coming in. We'll keep going for another 15 minutes. Toshi, can you take this question from Alistair? Do we know what are the impediments to Bali agricultural products getting better access to markets? Given the strong Bali brand internationally, this might be a good time to explore launching new products into global and regional markets.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point. And so first of all, I think domestic market has shrunk significantly, and so demand or the order from the hotels and restaurants have significantly reduced. So the Balinese kind of product which used to supply these markets have kind of shrunk significantly. And in terms of a market beyond Bali and Indonesia, I think this is probably a common challenges that a lot of other countries are also facing. For example, the quality of the products. Do they meet the international standard? Do they have access to tools and technologies and skills to process the raw materials into a sellable product? Do they have skills for the international marketing? Do they have a capacity to network internationally? I think these are probably some of the things that is preventing currently the Balinese companies or producers to expand internationally. But we do have some examples such as East Bali Cashew, which we have seen is tremendous growth in the last 10 years or so in improving the quality and in accessing the international market. So I think there are also a hope. Thank you.
Thanks, Toshi. We have a question for Tunga from Bunabila. Would like to know about the spatial condition in the tourism area. Is it now fully empty and abandoned? Does it affect, does it have any other impacts such as an increase in crime, for example? Also, Bali is famous for having its Banjar and Desa Adat. Does this have a great help in maintaining maintaining the restriction activities? Tunga.
Yes, thanks for the questions, Nabila. So for this, the first question, how's the situation of the tourism in Bali right now? So for the first 2 months, it has been very empty because the island is basically restricted all the people that's coming. So for example, in Ubud, I found that the streets were very empty. It's almost like the Balinese Silence Day or Nyepi. However, again, with still the restrictions, so for people who's coming to Bali from outside the island has to have the rapid test result. So it's open, but still restricted. And while for people who's stuck here in Bali, we also have like precautionary measure to wear masks and then bring hand sanitizer and etc. But for business tourism, slowly is already open, like a lot of restaurants and yoga studios and other stores has also opened, but the time is still limited until 6 p.m. That's the condition of the tourism. For the Banjar role, does it have a great help in maintaining restriction or activities? So yes, Banjar is it's very strong here. Like they have a very useful role in organizing the people in the village. And when COVID happens, so Banjar has a great role in doing a lot of initiatives, not just distributing the supports to the households, but also they're doing a lot of initiatives in terms of having more security in their village. For example, for people outside the village, they need to like sanitize the people, and also the people has to like report what are the needs or what are the events that come to the village. And also a lot of initiatives in terms of providing hand sanitizer and masks during the village. So yes, I think Banjar has been a great role in maintaining the activities here during COVID-19. And over to you, Eva.
Thanks. Thanks, Tunga. We have a question from Thomas. Is there scope for mobilizing traditional barter and self-help Kerja Bakti mechanisms in villages at least to achieve basic needs? Tunga, I don't know whether you have anything to add on this one, but I know of one initiative, which is Pasar Rakyat, that is being initiated that is engaging the kind of barter systems to make sure that people's basic needs are provided for. I think there's certainly scope for these kinds of initiatives. Tunga, I don't know whether anything else, you have anything else to add, but if anyone in the audience has examples to share in the chat box, that would be really, really useful. Tunga?
Yes, I think, Eva, that's a wonderful idea. That's actually from a good friend of mine, Pak Thomas. So thank you so much for the idea.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think there's definitely scope for a lot of experimentation there. We have a question from Jerome. Hi, Jerome. Nice to see you here. For long-term support of livelihoods, what trend do you see in terms of support, reskilling in the agricultural sector? Toshi, I don't know whether you have anything to add, but what we're seeing a lot of people, we saw 16% of the people that we spoke with that are returning to agriculture. We're also seeing a lot of urban gardening and hydroponics becoming very popular among younger people. So I think in terms of reskilling, it's providing basic agricultural skills to those who may have lost them, but then also focusing on value adding to the produce itself. So there are two areas there. One is providing for food security, and then also supporting livelihoods through agricultural activities by adding value and then creating markets for those products. Toshi, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's sufficient.
Okay, so I see that we're losing. Some people are leaving, so we'll take another few questions for those that are leaving. Thank you so much for joining. I might just actually, before we too many people leave, just run a quick poll on how useful you found this seminar. I'm not saying that the Q&A session is over. We'll keep going, but just want to get a sense of how informative people have found this webinar so far. So you'll see a box pop up on your screen, and if you could click submit. We've got 25%. We'll share the results shortly. Around half of the people have responded. We'll wait a little bit more. I'll take another question from Adrian. From survey data, can we estimate for the next 9 months the total volume required of food and other essential supplies? And then what is the cost of this? With this information, we could coordinate all government, NGO and volunteer efforts to ensure sufficiency and reduce wastage. Who wanted to take that question, Toshi?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's having this type of information will be definitely useful. I think that we, as we kind of started with the methodologies and limitations, we need to be very careful about predicting based on this small sample size. So I think as it is, probably not. But I think if there's a more opportunity to conduct additional survey with a larger sample size, I think that could probably be used as a basis for calculation.
Thanks, Toshi. We've also got another really interesting piece of advice, which is maybe Kopernik could arrange a workshop of those successful Balinese companies such as Pod Chocolate, which have built and marketed their agricultural or natural products to exhibit to others what is needed to meet standards regionally and internationally. Thanks for that idea, Alistair. That's great. Maybe we can partner with DFAT on that one. Should we share the results of the poll? Okay, so 59% have found it very informative, 32% informative, and 9% moderately informative. So thank you so much for that feedback. It really helps us. And thanks for participating in the poll. So in terms of the, we have another question from Jerome, which is about any ideas on how to improve the agricultural supply chain, knowing that there is surplus food rotting in North Bali right now because of the reduced takeoff from hotels and restaurants, while families in need are struggling to feed themselves. This is the million-dollar question, Jerome, and something that I think you've been participating in the coordination group as well. There is an initiative underway which we are also part of, where that's connecting, that's mapping out the needs and matching them up with the responses, with the available food. So it's you really highlighted such a real tragedy. You know, there are lots of people in need, and there's surplus, but those two are just not being connected. Okay, then we have a question from Boogie Setiawan. Based on the results of your survey, would you conclude that migrant workers or non-Balinese are the ones who were the most significantly impacted? If yes, is it also safe to assume that those migrant workers are working in the tourism sector? Stefan.
Yes, thank you. Well, as we know that, you know, like everywhere, I mean, like in this economy, that the informal sector is the most vulnerable sector in the society, where they have no guarantee in terms of, can say that this insurance, you know, like all these, you know, like because they are not in the system. And when there's the hit in the economy and this informal sector, I guess, in my opinion, will surely have the highest impact. Because they live using this unsystematic method of economy. Well, as we know that this Bali economy is, the tourism is quite attractive to everyone. I mean, there are lots of people who are coming to Bali to try to work in the tourism sector, whether it is in the formal sector, in the tourism agency, or in the informal sector, such as driver, shopkeepers, or any other things. Yes. And this is quite interesting, and yes, based on our respondent characteristic, and these non-Balinese are somewhat working in the informal sector, because they really attracted by the opportunity that tourism is trying to give. And yes, we know that these non-Balinese are heavily impacted, because yes, they have not yet get the support, maybe because they are not fully integrated in the society, as Tunga mentioned before. Hopefully that answered the questions.
Thank you, Stefan. So we've received a number of suggestions. Thank you to those who have provided the suggestions in the text box. We'll certainly be following up on those. We'll take two more questions and then wind up. So there is one question statement, which is wondering from Rahmadi Ranyut. I wonder whether the fact that the primary source of aid is a largely cultural institution, which is the Banjar, whether that has an impact on the fact that non-Balinese women and informal workers are disproportionately supported. So I think we've touched on this a bit, but Tunga or Stefan, do you want to add anything? And then we'll move to the last question.
Yes, Eva, I could add more on this. So thanks, Rahmadi, for the questions. So the goal of this, the research is to better understand what types of people who has impacted more during COVID-19 based on the gender, type of works, and origin. So this is the descriptive finding that we found based on the research. So that's why we are not in the position to conclude anything. However, the reason we started the research so that the finding could be a better assist the government as well as another support providers, for example, NGOs and private sectors, to know that actually these peoples are the target group who has been impacted more and also need more attention. So we will distribute the findings of the research to the government and to all the players that has been doing the supports here in Bali. Yeah.
Thank you, Tunga. And we'll now move to our last question from Peter Sprang. What about apps such as Jakarta-based cultivar traceability tools? Can they be used to connect food producers with new markets after losing hotels, tourists, restaurants? I'll start responding to that one. Yes, I think there are some great apps available that can be leveraged. The issue remains connecting those the farmers to them. So a lot of work needs to be done there. Toshi, do you want to add anything there? But
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really appreciate all these ideas coming out of the audience. I think one of the great things about the webinar today is to get additional creative ideas, and I think these are a fantastic list. And we are all in this together. So I think if any of the participants want to pick up some of the ideas, I think that will be a great opportunity, and we will definitely also, as a Kopernik, look into all the ideas and try to do in our own way, in our own small way, provide the appropriate assistance.
Thanks, Toshi, and that will wrap up our webinar and our Q&A session. Thank you so much to all of you for taking the time. Thank you for being so engaged. We really, really appreciate it. We hope to see you at our next webinar, and we'll be sending an email to the email address that you registered with, which will provide a link to the reports. There's actually another report as part of this one, so you'll get 2 for the price of 1. Stay well, stay healthy, everyone, and thanks again. And signing out from Ubud. Thank you.